The storm rolled across the Oklahoma Territory with a fury that turned the January sky black as coal. And when Juanita Wright saw her two younger sisters stumbling through the wind-whipped snow behind her, their lips already turning blue, she knew they would die if they did not find shelter within the hour. She was 23 years old, the eldest of three Apache sisters who had been traveling from their destroyed village near the Wichita Mountains toward Fort Sill, hoping to find refuge among the soldiers there. Their parents had died during a cavalry raid 6 months earlier, a raid that had been meant for a different band entirely, but had swept through their peaceful settlement like wildfire through dry grass. Juanita had grabbed her sisters, 19-year-old Juliana and 18-year-old Jessica, and they had survived in the wilderness since then, moving from place to place, always one step ahead of starvation or worse. The blizzard had come out of nowhere, a January storm that transformed the rolling Oklahoma prairie into a white nightmare. They had been following a wagon trail toward what Juanita hoped was Kingfisher, a settlement she had heard about from a trader, but now she could barely see 10 feet ahead. Jessica was coughing badly, a deep rattling sound that terrified Juanita. Juliana kept stumbling, her moccasins soaked through from the snow. "We have to keep moving," Juanita shouted over the howling wind, though her own body screamed for rest. She wrapped her thin blanket tighter around herself, knowing it was nearly useless against this cold. They wore traditional Apache clothing that served them well in most weather, but this blizzard was beyond anything they had prepared for. Through the swirling white curtain, a dark shape emerged. At first, Juanita thought it might be a boulder or a dead tree, but as they stumbled closer, she realized it was a building. A cabin, solid and sturdy with smoke rising from a stone chimney. Light glowed in the windows, warm and inviting and utterly impossible. They had found salvation. Juanita dragged her sisters forward, practically carrying Jessica now. When they reached the cabin door, she pounded on it with her fist, not caring about propriety or caution. They would die out here. Nothing else mattered. The door swung open, revealing a tall man with sandy brown hair and startled blue eyes. He wore work clothes, denim and flannel, and the warmth from inside the cabin rolled over them like a blessing. He took one look at the three freezing women on his doorstep and immediately stepped aside. "Get in here," he said, his voice rough with concern. "Jesus, get inside before you freeze to death." Juanita half carried Jessica across the threshold while Juliana stumbled in behind them. The man shut the door quickly, blocking out the savage wind. The cabin was small but well built, with a large fireplace crackling cheerfully against the far wall. It was the most beautiful thing Juanita had ever seen. "Sit by the fire," the man ordered, already moving to grab blankets from a trunk near the wall. "Get those wet things off. I will get you something dry to wear." Juanita's fingers were too numb to work properly, but she managed to help Jessica out of her soaked clothing while the man discreetly turned his back. He returned with several large wool shirts and some blankets, setting them down without looking directly at them. His manners impressed Juanita even through her exhaustion. "Thank you," she managed to say, her teeth chattering so hard she could barely form the words. "We would have died." "No thanks needed," the man said. He moved to the stove and began preparing something, his movements efficient and practiced. "I am Franklin Harper. This cabin is about 5 miles outside Kingfisher. You picked a hell of a day to be traveling." "We had no choice," Juanita replied, pulling one of the huge wool shirts over her head. It hung on her like a dress, but it was dry and warm. She helped Jessica into another one, worried by how pale her youngest sister looked. "I am Juanita Wright. These are my sisters, Juliana and Jessica." Franklin turned to look at them properly for the first time. His eyes were kind. Juanita noticed, without the hardness or cruelty she had learned to expect from most white men. He appeared to be in his late 20s, with strong hands and a weathered face that spoke of years working outdoors. "Apache?" he asked, and Juanita tensed, ready to grab her sisters and run back into the storm if necessary. But Franklin just nodded thoughtfully. "You are a long way from home, or what used to be home, I suppose." The acknowledgement of what had been done to her people surprised Juanita. Most settlers pretended not to notice or, worse, celebrated the destruction of Apache villages. She found herself studying Franklin more carefully. "We have been traveling for months," she admitted, "trying to find somewhere safe." Franklin brought over 3 tin cups filled with something hot. Coffee, Juanita realized as the bitter smell reached her. She accepted the cup gratefully, wrapping her cold hands around it. Jessica took tiny sips, still coughing occasionally. Juliana drank hers quickly, some color finally returning to her cheeks. "That storm is going to last through the night," Franklin said, settling into a chair near the fire. "Maybe into tomorrow. You cannot go anywhere in this weather." "We do not want to impose," Juanita began, but Franklin waved her words away. "You will die if you leave. Simple as that." He paused, seeming to consider something. "I have been alone in this cabin for 2 years now. Honestly, the company will be welcome, but I want to be clear about something." Juanita tensed again, wondering what price he would demand for his hospitality. She had learned that nothing came free, especially not for Apache women, but Franklin's next words surprised her completely. "This cabin is yours if you will stay with me, not as servants or anything like that, as equals. Partners, maybe. I have been trying to build a ranch here, but it is too much work for one person. I could use the help, and you clearly need a safe place. If you are willing to work, you can stay as long as you want. And if you decide to leave later, I will give you provisions and horses to get wherever you are going." Juanita stared at him, certain she had misunderstood. "You would let us stay, just like that." "Just like that," Franklin confirmed. "Well, not just like that. You would need to work. I have cattle that need tending, a garden that needs planning, repairs to make. But you would have a roof over your heads, food, safety, and your own space. I am not expecting anything inappropriate." The clarification made Juanita relax slightly. She looked at her sisters. Jessica had fallen asleep against Juliana's shoulder, exhausted by their ordeal. Juliana met Juanita's eyes and gave a small nod. "We can work," Juanita said firmly. "We are not helpless. We know how to handle livestock, how to grow food, how to repair buildings. We will earn our keep." "I figured you would," Franklin said with a slight smile. "You do not get the look you have by being helpless. You have been surviving out there on your own for a while, I would guess." 6 months, Juanita admitted. "Since the raid." Franklin's expression darkened. "I am sorry. I have heard about some of the raids. Most of them were wrong, attacking peaceful villages. The army does not always distinguish between hostile and peaceful, and that is putting it kindly." The fact that he acknowledged this, that he did not pretend the injustices had not happened, made something in Juanita's chest loosen. She had been carrying so much anger and grief, and no one had acknowledged any of it. They had simply been expected to disappear quietly. "We should all get some sleep," Franklin said, standing up. "The bed is over there behind that curtain. You 3 take it. I will sleep out here by the fire." "We cannot take your bed," Juanita protested. "You can and you will," Franklin said firmly. "You are half frozen and exhausted. Jessica needs proper rest to fight off whatever is trying to settle in her chest. I have slept on this floor plenty of times. It will not hurt me one bit." Juanita wanted to argue further, but Jessica coughed again, and she knew Franklin was right. They needed real rest. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Truly." "Get some sleep," Franklin replied. We will talk more in the morning when everyone is warmed up and rested. Juanita woke to weak sunlight filtering through the cabin's small window and the smell of something cooking. For a moment, she could not remember where she was, and then the events of the previous night came flooding back. The storm, the desperate search for shelter, Franklin Harper opening his door and offering them sanctuary. She slipped quietly out of bed, careful not to wake Jessica and Juliana, and peered around the curtain that separated the sleeping area from the main room. Franklin stood at the stove, cooking what appeared to be eggs and bacon. He had already stoked the fire back to life, and the cabin was warm and cozy. "Good morning," he said without turning around. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months," Juanita admitted, stepping fully into the room. "How did you know I was awake?" "Heard the bed creak," Franklin replied. He glanced at her, and Juanita realized she was still wearing only his oversized shirt. But his gaze was respectful, not leering, and he quickly looked back at his cooking. "Your sister's still sleeping?" "Yes. Jessica especially needs the rest." "She sounded pretty bad last night. We should keep an eye on that cough." Franklin transferred the food to tin plates. "Come eat. You need to rebuild your strength." Juanita joined him at the small table, accepting the plate gratefully. The food was simple but well cooked, and she realized she had not had a proper hot meal in days. They had been surviving on whatever they could forage or trap, and in winter that was precious little. "The storm has passed," Franklin said, nodding toward the window. "Left about 2 feet of snow, though. We will not be going anywhere for a few days until things melt a bit." "That gives us time to discuss your offer properly," Juanita said. She looked at him directly. "Why are you doing this? You do not know us. For all you know, we could rob you and disappear." Franklin considered this while chewing a bite of bacon. "Could you?" he asked mildly. "No," Juanita admitted. "We are not thieves, but you did not know that." "I have been alone out here for 2 years," Franklin said. "Before that, I worked on a ranch down in Texas. The owner there taught me that you judge people by their actions, not their bloodline or the color of their skin. He was Apache himself, actually. Married to a white woman, had a successful ranch, treated everyone fairly. He showed me that all the things people say about different races being inferior or savage are just lies told by people who want to justify their own cruelty." Juanita felt her eyes sting with unexpected tears. "There are not many who think like you. More than you might think," Franklin replied. "We are just not as loud as the cruel ones. But that is not the only reason I made the offer. Truth is, I am failing out here on my own. This ranch is too much for one person. I have lost cattle because I could not watch them properly. The garden was a disaster last year because I could not manage all the work. I need help, and I can pay for it with room and board. You need safety and shelter. It makes sense for both of us." Juliana emerged from behind the curtain, followed by Jessica, who looked slightly better after a night of rest. Franklin immediately set about preparing more food for them, and Juanita watched how he moved, efficient and careful. He was not doing this for show. This was simply who he was. Over breakfast, Franklin explained more about his ranch. He had 160 acres, claimed through the land run of 1889, just a few years earlier. He had a small herd of cattle, maybe 50 head, and a few horses. The cabin was solid, built with his own hands, but he had planned to expand it and never found the time. There was so much work to do, always too much for one person. "If you stay," he said, looking at all 3 sisters, "we would need to establish some rules. Nothing harsh, just common sense things. We share the work equally. We respect each other's privacy. Any decisions about the ranch we discuss together. And most importantly, if any of you ever want to leave, you tell me and I will help you get wherever you want to go. No arguments, no guilt." This would be a partnership, not a prison. What about the people in Kingfisher? Juliana asked. She had been quiet through most of breakfast, but now she looked worried. Will they accept us being here? Franklin's expression hardened slightly. Some will, some will not. I will not lie to you about that. There is prejudice in Kingfisher, same as everywhere else. But you would be under my protection. Anyone who wants to cause trouble will have to go through me first. And this ranch is far enough from town that you would not have to deal with people daily if you did not want to. Jessica coughed again, and Franklin frowned. That needs tending. I have some medicines that might help, and if it does not improve in a few days, I will ride to Kingfisher and get the doctor to come out. I do not care what anyone in town thinks about it. The fierceness in his voice when he said it made Juanita's heart do something strange in her chest. She had spent so long being afraid, being defensive, expecting cruelty from every white person she encountered. Franklin was different, and she was not quite sure how to handle that. We will stay, she decided, and saw relief flash across Franklin's face. At least through the winter. We can see how the partnership works. If it goes well, we can discuss something more permanent come spring. That is fair, Franklin agreed. He stood and offered his hand first to Juanita, then to each of her sisters in turn. Welcome to the Harper Ranch, then, small as it is. The first week was an adjustment for everyone. The sisters had their own rhythms and ways of doing things, and Franklin had grown accustomed to working alone. But gradually, they found their balance. Juanita discovered that Franklin was an early riser, up before dawn to tend the animals, so she started rising with him to help. Juliana had a gift with the horses and took over most of their care. Jessica, once her cough began to improve with rest and Franklin's medicines, proved to have a talent for cooking and started planning a proper garden for spring. At night, they would sit around the fire, and slowly, stories began to emerge. Franklin told them about growing up in Missouri, about his parents dying of fever when he was 16, about working his way west and learning the ranching trade. The sisters shared memories of their childhood, of their mother teaching them to weave and their father teaching them to track and hunt. They did not talk much about the raid yet. That wound was still too fresh. Juanita found herself watching Franklin more than she probably should. He was unfailingly kind but never condescending. He listened when they spoke, really listened, and took their suggestions about the ranch seriously. When Juliana pointed out that the cattle were being harassed by wolves and suggested building better fencing, Franklin immediately agreed, and they spent 3 days constructing it together. When Jessica mentioned that the cabin would be healthier with better ventilation, Franklin spent an entire day modifying the windows. One evening, about 2 weeks after they had arrived, Franklin and Juanita were outside checking on the cattle before dark. The snow had largely melted, leaving the ground muddy and treacherous, but the air was crisp and clear. The sun was setting in a blaze of orange and pink, painting the Oklahoma prairie in colors that made Juanita's breath catch. "Beautiful, is it not?" Franklin said, following her gaze. "I have seen many sunsets," Juanita replied, "but this land has its own character. It is different from the mountains where we lived." "Do you miss it?" "Every day," Juanita admitted, "but there is nothing to go back to. Our village is gone, scattered. The people who survived have moved to the reservations or disappeared into other tribes. This is our home now, I suppose." Franklin was quiet for a moment. "I am glad you are here," he said finally. "I know the circumstances that brought you here were terrible, but I am still glad. The ranch is better with you here. I am better with you here." Juanita looked at him sharply, surprised by the emotion in his voice. Franklin met her eyes, and she saw something there that made her pulse quicken. It was too soon, she told herself. They barely knew each other. but she could not deny the connection she felt, growing stronger every day. "We should get back," she said, suddenly flustered. "It will be dark soon." "Juanita," Franklin said, and the way he said her name made her stop. "I just want you to know that you are safe here, truly safe. And if you ever decide to leave, I will help you. But I hope you will stay." "I hope so too," Juanita whispered, and then they walked back to the cabin in a silence that felt charged with possibility. February turned into March, and the prairie began to come alive with spring. The sisters had fully integrated into the ranch's operations now. They had expanded the cabin slightly, adding a separate sleeping area for Franklin so the women could have more privacy. The work was hard but satisfying, and Juanita realized she felt more at peace than she had in years. Franklin made good on his word about going to Kingfisher for supplies. The first time he went alone, but the second time, Juanita insisted on coming with him. She was tired of hiding, tired of feeling afraid. If this was to be their home, she needed to face the town and its people. Kingfisher was larger than she expected, with a main street lined with businesses and homes spreading out in all directions. People stared as they rode in, and Juanita held her head high, refusing to show any discomfort. Franklin rode beside her, his presence steady and reassuring. At the general store, the owner, a middle-aged man with suspicious eyes, clearly did not want to serve them. But Franklin placed a large order and paid in cash, and money won out over prejudice. They loaded their supplies and were preparing to leave when a woman approached them. She was perhaps 40 years old, with kind eyes and graying hair tucked under a bonnet. "You must be the Harper sisters," she said, and Juanita realized the woman was addressing her, not Franklin. "Right," Juanita corrected. "We are the Wright sisters. I am Juanita." "Forgive me," the woman said. "I am Martha Henderson. My husband and I own the ranch to the east of Franklin's place. I have been meaning to ride over and introduce myself, but with the weather and all. Well, I wanted you to know that you are welcome. If you ever need anything or just want company, please come by." The offer was so unexpected that Juanita found herself blinking back tears. "Thank you," she managed. "That means more than you know." After Martha walked away, Franklin smiled at Juanita. "See, not everyone is bad. There are good people here." "One good person does not make a town," Juanita replied, but she felt lighter nonetheless. On the ride back, they talked about plans for the ranch. Franklin wanted to increase the herd, maybe get some chickens for eggs. Juanita suggested they try growing corn in addition to vegetables, something her people had done successfully for generations. They discussed and debated, and Juanita realized that Franklin truly did see this as a partnership. He valued her opinion, treated her as an equal. It was during this ride that Juanita admitted to herself what she had been denying for weeks. She was falling in love with Franklin Harper. The realization terrified her. Love made you vulnerable, and vulnerability could be deadly, but Franklin had been nothing but honorable, nothing but kind. And the way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she was not paying attention, suggested that his feelings might mirror her own. April brought warmer weather and new challenges. A pair of cattle rustlers tried to steal some of their herd, but Juliana spotted them and raised the alarm. Franklin and Juanita confronted the thieves, and there was a tense moment where Juanita thought violence might erupt. But Franklin's calm authority and the fact that they were outnumbered made the rustlers retreat. They reported the incident to the sheriff in Kingfisher, who promised to keep an eye out but did not seem particularly invested in protecting their ranch. "We will have to watch out for ourselves," Franklin said after the sheriff left. "But we can handle it. We have been handling it." The "we" in that sentence made Juanita's heart warm. They were truly a team now, all four of them working together to make the ranch succeed. One evening in late April, after Jessica and Juliana had gone to bed, Juanita and Franklin sat outside on the porch they had built together. The night was warm and full of cricket songs, the sky absolutely blazing with stars. "I have been thinking," Franklin said, his voice careful, "about the future, about this ranch." "What about it?" Juanita asked, though her heart had started beating faster. "I want to make it official. Not just the ranch as a partnership, but us as a family. You, me, your sisters. I want to go to Kingfisher and have papers drawn up that list all of us as equal owners of this land. That way, if anything ever happens to me, you will not be left with nothing. The ranch would be yours." Juanita stared at him. "Franklin, that is, are you sure? That is a significant legal commitment." "I am completely sure," Franklin said. He turned to face her fully. "Juanita, I know we have only known each other a few months, but they have been the best months of my life. You and your sisters have made this place a real home. I want to make sure you are protected, legally and officially. I want everyone to know that you belong here." "That is incredibly generous," Juanita said, her voice shaking slightly. "But I have to ask, is this just about the ranch? Or is there something more?" Franklin reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused from work, and his touch sent tingles up her arm. "There is something more," he admitted. "I have been trying not to rush you, not to push, because I know you have been through so much. But Juanita, I care about you. More than care about you. I think about you constantly. I find myself looking for you whenever you are not nearby. You make me laugh, you challenge me, you make me want to be a better man. I am falling in love with you if I am being completely honest." Juanita's breath caught. Hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way that terrified and exhilarated her. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "I have been trying not to, because love is dangerous and I have lost so much already. But I cannot help it. You are good and kind, and you make me feel safe in a way I never expected to feel again." "You do not have to be afraid," Franklin said gently. "I will never hurt you, Juanita. I will spend every day of my life proving that to you if you will let me." He leaned in slowly, and Juanita met him halfway. Their kiss was soft and tentative at first, then deeper, more certain. When they finally pulled apart, Juanita was breathless and trembling, but it was from happiness, not fear. "This changes things," she said, though she could not stop smiling. "For the better, I hope," Franklin replied, grinning back at her. "For the better," Juanita agreed. They decided to wait a few weeks before saying anything to Jessica and Juliana, wanting to be certain of their feelings. But Juanita suspected her sisters already knew. Juliana had been giving her knowing looks for weeks, and Jessica had started conveniently disappearing whenever Franklin and Juanita were working on something together, giving them time alone. In May, Franklin made good on his promise. They all rode to Kingfisher together, and Franklin met with the lawyer to have papers drawn up establishing them as equal partners in the ranch. The lawyer was clearly uncomfortable with the arrangement, but Franklin was insistent, and the papers were filed legally. Walking out of that office, Juanita felt like she had been given back something precious that had been stolen from her: security, legitimacy, a place that was truly hers. That night, back at the ranch, Franklin asked her properly. "I know we have only known each other 5 months," he said, taking both her hands in his. They were standing outside under the stars again, their special place. "And I know that you have every reason to be cautious. But Juanita, right, I love you. I love your strength and your courage and your fierce devotion to your sisters. I love how you are not afraid to challenge me when you think I am wrong. I love your laugh and the way you bite your lip when you are concentrating on something. I want to spend the rest of my life with you if you will have me. Will you marry me?" Juanita looked at this man who had given her and her sisters shelter when they needed it most, who had treated them as equals, who had fallen in love with her despite all the reasons the world gave them to stay apart. She thought about the life they could build together, the future that suddenly seemed bright with possibility. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "Yes, I will marry you, Franklin Harper." He swept her into his arms, spinning her around, both of them laughing with pure joy. When he set her down, he kissed her again, and Juanita felt like her heart might burst from happiness. Jessica and Juliana were thrilled when they announced the engagement. Juliana hugged Franklin fiercely, thanking him for being the brother she never had. Jessica cried happy tears and immediately started planning what Juanita should wear for the wedding. They decided to marry in June, giving them time to prepare. Martha Henderson and her husband offered to host the wedding at their ranch, which had more space and would make things easier. It was a small guest list, just a few neighboring ranchers who had shown kindness to them, the Henderson family, and the minister from Kingfisher's small church. The morning of the wedding, Juanita woke with butterflies in her stomach. Jessica had stayed up late the night before, altering a dress that Martha had loaned them, making it fit Juanita's frame perfectly. It was simple but beautiful, pale blue with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Juliana helped her with her hair, weaving small wildflowers into the braid. "You look beautiful," she said, her eyes shining. "I am so happy for you, sister. You deserve this. You deserve happiness." "We all deserve happiness," Juanita replied, squeezing her sister's hand, "and we are going to have it, I promise." The ceremony itself was simple and heartfelt. Franklin wore his best clothes, his hair neatly combed, his eyes never leaving Juanita's face as she walked toward him. When the minister asked if he would take Juanita as his wife, Franklin's "I do" rang out clear and certain. When it was Juanita's turn, she looked into Franklin's kind blue eyes and said her own "I do" with absolute conviction. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Franklin kissed her thoroughly, and the small gathering of guests applauded. Martha had prepared food for a celebration afterward, and for a few hours, Juanita allowed herself to simply be happy. No fear, no looking over her shoulder, just joy. That night back at their cabin, their home, Franklin carried Juanita over the threshold despite her laughing protests. Jessica and Juliana had tactfully decided to spend the night at the Henderson ranch, giving the newlyweds privacy. "Are you happy?" Franklin asked, setting her down gently. "Happier than I ever thought I could be," Juanita replied honestly. "You have given me everything, Franklin. A home, safety, love. I do not know how to thank you." "You do not need to thank me," Franklin said, cupping her face in his hands. "You have given me just as much. More even. You have given me purpose and partnership and a future I actually want to live. I love you, Juanita Harper." Hearing her new name made Juanita smile. "I love you too." They made love that night with tenderness and passion, and Juanita felt truly safe for the first time since the raid that had destroyed her village. In Franklin's arms, she was not Apache or white, victim or survivor. She was simply loved. Summer on the ranch was busy but happy. The herd had grown, the garden was producing well, and they had added chickens just as Franklin had wanted. Jessica had taken over most of the cooking and meal planning, turning their simple meals into something special. Juliana had started training 2 of the younger horses, and she had a real gift for it. Franklin and Juanita worked side by side every day, building their life together piece by piece. In August, Juanita realized her monthly bleeding had not come. She waited another week to be certain, then another before telling Franklin. When she finally did, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around just as he had when she agreed to marry him, his face alight with joy. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Juanita asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. Happy does not even begin to cover it, Franklin replied. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. I am going to be a father. We are going to be parents. This is the best news I have ever gotten in my entire life. Jessica and Juliana were equally thrilled. They immediately began preparing, starting to collect materials to make baby clothes and planning how they would rearrange the cabin to make space for a cradle. Martha Henderson rode over when she heard the news, bringing gifts and advice. Being a mother is the hardest and most rewarding thing you will ever do, Martha told Juanita. But you have a good man and a strong support system. You will do wonderfully. As Juanita's belly grew through the fall, Franklin became increasingly protective. He did not want her doing heavy work, constantly worried that she was overexerting herself. It was sweet, but occasionally frustrating. I am pregnant, not fragile, Juanita reminded him one day when he tried to stop her from hauling a bucket of water. Apache women work until the day they give birth. I am not going to break. I know, Franklin said, looking chagrined. I am sorry, I just worry. You are the most important thing in my life, Juanita. You and this baby. Juanita softened, reaching up to touch his face. I know, and I love you for it, but you have to trust me to know my own limits. They found a balance, as they always did. Juanita continued working, but allowed her sisters and Franklin to take on some of the heavier tasks. Franklin channeled his protective energy into preparing for the baby's arrival, building a beautiful cradle from oak wood and helping Jessica sew tiny clothes. One evening in October, Juanita was showing Franklin something traditional her mother had taught her about preparing herbs when Jessica came running in, her face flushed with excitement. There is a rider coming, she announced. Someone from Kingfisher, I think. They all went outside to see who it was. The rider was a young man Franklin recognized from town, and he handed Franklin an official-looking letter before riding away. Franklin opened it, his expression growing serious as he read. What is it? Juanita asked, worry creeping into her voice. It is about the land, Franklin said. There is a challenge to our claim. Some man named Gerald Foster is saying that I did not properly file my claim during the land run and that this property should be his. Juanita felt ice fill her veins. Can he do that? Can he take our home? He can try, Franklin said, his jaw setting in a determined line. But he is going to have to fight us every step of the way. We have the legal documents. We have been working this land for over 2 years, and I will be damned if I let some land grabber steal our home out from under us. The next few weeks were stressful. Franklin had to make multiple trips to Kingfisher to meet with the lawyer and file counterclaims. The sisters kept the ranch running while he was gone, but the uncertainty hung over them like a dark cloud. Juanita tried not to let the stress affect the baby, but she found herself constantly worried. Finally, in November, the matter went before the territorial judge. Franklin, Juanita, and the lawyer presented their evidence. The original claim documents, receipts showing continuous habitation and improvement of the land, testimony from neighbors about their residency. Gerald Foster's case rested on a technicality about the timing of Franklin's claim filing. The judge reviewed everything carefully. The courtroom was silent except for the scratching of his pen as he made notes. Finally, he looked up. Mr. Foster, your challenge is denied, he said firmly. Mr. Harper's claim was filed correctly and has been maintained properly. He and his family have clear legal right to this property. Case dismissed. The relief that washed over Juanita was so intense she felt dizzy. Franklin grabbed her hand, squeezing it tightly. They had won. Their home was safe. Foster was clearly furious, but there was nothing he could do. As they left the courthouse, Franklin pulled Juanita into a tight embrace. It is over, he said. No one is taking our home, not now, not ever. I was so scared, Juanita admitted. I thought we might lose everything. We would have started over if we had to, Franklin said. But we did not have to. Justice actually prevailed for once. Our family is safe. Back at the ranch, they celebrated with a special dinner that Jessica prepared. The weight that had been pressing down on all of them lifted, and Juanita realized how much the stress had been affecting her. Now, with the threat gone, she could focus entirely on the approaching birth of her child. Winter came again, and Juanita's due date drew near. Martha had agreed to help with the birth, having delivered several babies in her time. Franklin was a nervous wreck, constantly asking if Juanita was all right, if she needed anything, if the baby was coming yet. "The baby will come when the baby is ready," Juanita told him with amusement. "You pacing around like a trapped animal will not speed things up." In late January, almost exactly 1 year after the sisters had first stumbled to Franklin's door during that blizzard, Juanita's labor began. It started in the early morning, subtle contractions that gradually increased in intensity. By afternoon, they had sent for Martha, and by evening, Juanita was in full labor. Franklin was absolutely useless, too worried to be of any real help. Jessica finally banned him from the sleeping area and made him wait with Juliana by the fire. Juanita could hear him pacing out there, could hear Juliana trying to calm him down. Despite the pain, Juanita found herself smiling. This was what love looked like. This was family. The birth was hard but not overly complicated. Martha coached her through it with calm expertise, and Jessica held her hand, murmuring encouragement in Apache. Just after midnight, as a new day dawned, Juanita gave one final push and heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby's first cry. "It is a boy," Martha announced, quickly cleaning the infant and wrapping him in a soft blanket. "A healthy, strong boy." She placed the baby in Juanita's arms, and Juanita looked down at her son's tiny, perfect face. He had Franklin's eyes, she thought, or at least they seemed blue in the lamplight. He had a full head of dark hair and surprisingly delicate features. "Can I let Franklin in now?" Jessica asked with a smile. "Yes," Juanita said, unable to look away from her son. "Let him meet his baby." Franklin practically ran into the room, his face pale and his eyes wild with worry. But when he saw Juanita sitting up holding their son, his expression transformed into pure wonder. "Is he?" Franklin started, his voice choked with emotion. "He is perfect," Juanita said. "Come meet your son." Franklin approached slowly, as if he were afraid he might break the spell. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, looking down at the baby with absolute awe. "He is so small," Franklin whispered. "All babies are small," Juanita said with a tired laugh. "Would you like to hold him?" She carefully transferred the baby to Franklin's arms, showing him how to support the head. Franklin held his son like he was the most precious thing in the world, which Juanita supposed he was. "Hello there, little one," Franklin murmured. "I am your father. And that is your mother, the strongest, bravest woman in the world. You are so loved already. So incredibly loved." Tears were streaming down Franklin's face, and Juanita felt her own eyes filling. This moment, this perfect moment, was worth every hardship they had endured to get here. "What should we name him?" Franklin asked. They had discussed names but had not settled on anything definite, wanting to wait until they met the baby to decide. Juanita looked at her son, thinking about the journey that had brought them here, about the blending of her Apache heritage and Franklin's American background. "I want to give him an Apache name and an American name," she said, "to honor both parts of who he is. What do you think of calling him James for your father, and we can call him Tsosi as his Apache name, which means slender?" Franklin considered this, looking down at their tiny son. "James Tsosi Harper," he said slowly. "I think it is perfect. He is perfect. You are perfect. I do not know what I did to deserve this happiness, but I am grateful for it every single day." "We are all grateful," Juliana said from the doorway. She and Jessica had been watching, and now they came in to admire their nephew properly. "He is beautiful, sister." "He looks like both of you," Jessica observed. "The best of both worlds." As winter gave way to spring, life on the Harper Ranch settled into a new rhythm centered around baby James. He was a good baby, healthy and generally happy, though he had his father's tendency to wake early. Franklin was a devoted father, always willing to walk with James when he was fussy, to change diapers, to do whatever was needed. Watching him with their son made Juanita fall in love with him all over again. Juliana had met a young rancher named Thomas Miller from a neighboring property, and a shy courtship was beginning. Jessica, at 19 now, had announced her intention to become a teacher and was studying every book Franklin owned. The ranch continued to grow and prosper, their herd now numbering over 100 head. In April, when James was 3 months old, they held a small celebration to mark the ranch's official second anniversary under joint ownership. Martha and her husband came, along with Thomas and a few other neighbors who had become friends, standing on the porch they had built together, watching her son sleep peacefully in Franklin's arms while her sisters laughed with their friends. Juanita felt a profound sense of contentment. They had started with nothing but each other and desperate hope during a blizzard. They had built a home, a family, a future. "What are you thinking about?" Franklin asked, coming to stand beside her. "Everything," Juanita replied. "How far we have come. How different things are from what I expected that night we stumbled to your door, half frozen and desperate. I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, even with your lips blue from cold," Franklin said with a smile. "And I remember hoping you would stay." "I remember being terrified," Juanita admitted. "Terrified of trusting you, terrified of what would happen if I did not. But you proved yourself over and over again. You gave us not just shelter but equality, not just safety but family." "We gave those things to each other," Franklin corrected. "You made this place a home, Juanita. You and your sisters. I was just existing here before. Now I am living." James made a small sound in his sleep, and Franklin looked down at his son with such love that Juanita's heart squeezed. This was happiness, she realized. This was peace. After everything they had lost, everything they had survived, they had found their way to something beautiful. Summer arrived hot and bright, and with it came news that filled Juanita with both joy and trepidation. She was pregnant again. They had not planned it quite so soon after James, but Franklin was overjoyed, and Juanita found herself excited as well. James would have a sibling close in age to grow up with. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Juanita knew what to expect now. She continued working on the ranch with her sisters, while Franklin doted on both her and James. Juliana and Thomas had become formally engaged, and they were planning a wedding for the fall. Jessica had started teaching some of the children on neighboring ranches, holding classes in the Hendersons' barn twice a week. In November, Juanita went into labor again. This birth was faster than the first, and by late afternoon, she had delivered a daughter. The baby girl had Juanita's dark hair and features, and when she opened her eyes, they were brown like her mother's. "A daughter," Franklin said, his voice full of wonder as he held her for the first time. "James has a little sister. What should we name her?" Juanita asked, exhausted but happy. "I want you to choose," Franklin said, "an Apache name that means something important to you." Juanita thought about it, looking at her daughter's face. "Nate," she said finally. "It was my mother's name. It means mischief maker, and for her American name, maybe Grace." Nate Grace Harper, Franklin said, testing it out. It is beautiful. She is beautiful. You have given me two perfect children, Juanita. I am the luckiest man alive. Juliana's wedding to Thomas took place in December, a joyful celebration despite the cold weather. Watching her sister marry a good man who clearly adored her filled Juanita with happiness. The Wright sisters had all found their place in this world, had all found safety and love, despite the cruelty they had faced. The years that followed were full of the ordinary challenges and joys of family life. James grew into a curious, energetic boy who loved helping his father with the cattle. Nate was indeed mischievous, always getting into things she should not, but she had her mother's intelligence and her father's kindness. When James was 4 and Nate was 3, Juanita gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Samuel and Sarah. Franklin joked that they were trying to populate the entire Oklahoma territory by themselves, but his joy at their growing family was evident in everything he did. Jessica eventually married as well, a schoolteacher from Kingfisher named Paul who shared her passion for education. She continued teaching, and she and Paul had 3 children of their own. Juliana and Thomas had 2 daughters and ran a successful ranch neighboring Franklin and Juanita's property. The Harper Ranch continued to grow and prosper. They eventually expanded to over 500 acres, with a herd of several hundred cattle and a reputation for fair dealing and quality livestock. Franklin trained James in ranching from an early age, and the boy took to it naturally. Nate announced at age 8 that she wanted to learn everything her brother learned, and Franklin agreed without hesitation, teaching both his children equally. Samuel and Sarah, as twins often do, were inseparable growing up. They had their own language when they were very small, and they always seemed to know what the other was thinking. Samuel had Franklin's patience and steady demeanor, while Sarah had Juanita's fierce determination. As the children grew, Franklin and Juanita made sure they understood both sides of their heritage. Juanita taught them Apache stories and traditions, taught them to track and to understand the land in the way her people had for generations. Franklin taught them American history and made sure they could read and write fluently. The children grew up understanding that they were part of 2 worlds and that both were valuable. There were still challenges, of course. Some people in Kingfisher never fully accepted an Apache woman and her white husband, never accepted their mixed-race children. But the Harper family had enough friends and allies that the prejudice, while hurtful, was never dangerous. And Franklin made it clear to anyone who would listen that his wife was his equal partner in everything, and that his children were to be treated with respect. One evening, when James was 16 and starting to take on more responsibility for the ranch, Juanita and Franklin sat on their porch watching the sunset, as they had done countless times over the years. They were both grayer now, with lines on their faces earned through hard work and laughter. But Franklin still looked at Juanita like she was the most beautiful woman in the world, and Juanita still felt her heart skip when he smiled at her. "You remember that night during the blizzard?" Franklin asked. "When you and your sisters showed up at my door, half frozen." "I remember thinking we were going to die," Juanita said. "And then you opened that door, and I thought maybe we would live after all. I had no idea you would become everything to me." "I knew the moment I saw you," Franklin admitted. "I looked at you standing there, fierce and protective of your sisters despite being near death yourself, and something in my chest just locked into place. I knew you were going to be important to me. I had no idea how important, but I knew. You saved us," Juanita said simply. "We saved each other," Franklin corrected, as he always did. "I was slowly dying of loneliness out here, Juanita. You gave me life, gave me purpose, gave me family. We saved each other. James came around the corner then, leading a horse. He had grown tall and strong with Franklin's build and Juanita's coloring. "Father, one of the fence posts broke near the north pasture. I can fix it tomorrow morning before we move the herd." "Good man," Franklin said proudly. "Check with your sister, too. Nate spotted some wolf tracks earlier. We might need to set some watches." James nodded and headed back toward the barn. Nate emerged from the house, 14 years old now and already taller than her mother. She had become an excellent horsewoman and tracker, and she was fiercely protective of the ranch. "Mama, are you going to come help me break that new mare tomorrow?" she asked. "If you want me to," Juanita replied with a smile, "though I think you could manage it yourself at this point." "I want you there anyway," Nate said. "You always know what the horses are thinking." After Nate went back inside, Franklin chuckled. "They are good kids, all of them. We did something right." "We did everything right," Juanita said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "We built something real here, Franklin, something lasting. Our children will have this ranch after we are gone, and they will pass it to their children. This is our legacy." "A legacy of love," Franklin said, kissing the top of her head. "Of two people from different worlds who found each other during a blizzard and built a life together, despite everything the world said should keep them apart." The twins came running out then, 12 years old and full of energy, arguing about something. Sarah wanted to help with the cattle drive planned for next week, and Samuel thought she should stay home because it would be too dangerous. Juanita and Franklin exchanged amused glances. "You are both going," Franklin declared, ending the argument. "And you will both follow instructions and stay safe. The Harper family sticks together, remember?" "Yes, Father," the twins chorused, then ran off to continue whatever game they had been playing. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Juanita reflected on the 17 years since that desperate night during the blizzard. She had thought then that she had lost everything: her village, her parents, her way of life. She had been certain that survival was the most she could hope for, but she had been wrong. She had not just survived. She had thrived. She had found love with a good man who treated her as an equal. She had built a home, raised children, created a legacy. The pain of her losses would never completely go away, but it had been joined by so much joy that the balance had shifted. "I love you, Franklin Harper," she said, looking up at her husband. "Thank you for opening your door that night. Thank you for offering us shelter. Thank you for seeing us as people worth saving." "I love you too, Juanita Harper," Franklin replied, his eyes shining with emotion. "And you do not need to thank me. That night when I opened my door and saw you standing there, I did not just find 3 women who needed shelter. I found my future. I found my family. I found my heart. So thank you for staying. Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely rancher. Thank you for building this life with me." They kissed then, a sweet kiss full of 17 years of partnership and love. When they pulled apart, Jessica was riding up the path with her husband Paul and their 3 children. They had come for a visit, as the extended family often did. "Aunt Juanita," Jessica's oldest son shouted, waving enthusiastically. The evening dissolved into happy chaos as the children played together, and the adults caught up on news. Juliana and Thomas arrived shortly after with their daughters, and suddenly, the cabin that had once seemed so small was filled to bursting with family. Watching them all, Juanita felt a profound sense of peace. This was what she had fought for, worked for, dreamed of during those dark months after the raid. Not just survival, but this: love, family, belonging. A place where she was not just tolerated but cherished. Where her children could grow up proud of both parts of their heritage. Where 3 Apache sisters who had sought shelter had found a home. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. James married a woman named Alice from Kingfisher, and they had 4 children who adored their grandparents. Nate, true to her independent nature, took over training horses full-time and became known throughout the territory for her skill. She eventually married a cavalry officer named John who respected her abilities and treated her as an equal partner. Samuel and Sarah both stayed on the ranch, working alongside their parents. Samuel married a young woman from the Henderson Ranch named Betty, and they had 3 sons. Sarah married a rancher named David from further west, and they had 2 daughters before tragedy struck. David was killed during a stampede when Sarah was pregnant with their 3rd child. She came home to the Harper Ranch, devastated and grieving, and Franklin and Juanita welcomed her without question. "You are always welcome here," Juanita told her daughter as Sarah wept in her arms. "This is your home always. We will help you raise your children. You are not alone." Sarah stayed at the ranch, and when her son was born, she named him David after his father. With her family's support, she gradually healed from her grief and eventually became the primary manager of the ranch's breeding program, developing a reputation for producing excellent cattle. As Franklin and Juanita grew older, they gradually turned more of the ranch's daily operations over to their children. James took over as the primary manager, with Samuel and Sarah working as his partners. But Franklin and Juanita remained active and involved, their advice sought on all major decisions. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a celebration that brought together over 100 people. Friends, neighbors, family, all gathering to honor the couple who had built something special in the Oklahoma Territory. The territorial governor even sent a letter of congratulation, acknowledging their contributions to the territory's development. 25 years, Franklin marveled as they danced together, his arms still strong despite the silver in his hair. "It feels like both a lifetime and no time at all." "We have lived a good life," Juanita said. "Not an easy one, but a good one. The best one," Franklin agreed. "I would not change a single thing." They were in their 60s when Franklin's health began to fail. He had been experiencing pain in his chest for several months before he finally admitted it to Juanita. The doctor from Kingfisher examined him and delivered the news gently but honestly. Franklin's heart was weak, damaged from years of hard work and stress. There was nothing that could be done except to take things easy and enjoy the time he had left. Franklin took the news with typical stoicism, but Juanita was devastated. She had always known, logically, that they would not live forever, but actually facing Franklin's mortality was harder than anything she had endured. "I am not afraid," Franklin told her one evening as they sat on their porch, watching another sunset. "I have lived a full life, Juanita. I have loved and been loved. I have children and grandchildren who will carry on after I am gone. I have built something meaningful. A man cannot ask for more than that." "I am not ready to lose you," Juanita whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I know," Franklin said gently, pulling her close. "And I am not ready to leave you, but when the time comes, I need you to promise me something, anything. Promise me you will keep living. Really living, not just existing. Spend time with our children and grandchildren. Keep running the ranch. Find joy wherever you can. Do not let grief consume you the way it almost did after the raid. Promise me." "I promise," Juanita said, though her heart was breaking. Franklin lived for another 2 years, gradually growing weaker but never losing his essential kindness and humor. He spent his final months surrounded by family, telling stories about the ranch's early days, giving advice to his grandchildren, and loving Juanita with every breath he took. He died peacefully in his sleep on a warm June night, with Juanita beside him holding his hand. She knew the moment he was gone, felt the absence of his presence like a physical blow. But even through her grief, she remembered her promise. Franklin had asked her to keep living, and she would honor that request. The funeral brought people from all over the territory. Franklin had been respected and liked, known for his fairness and integrity. Juanita stood surrounded by her children and grandchildren, accepting condolences with grace. When they buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, Juanita placed her hand on the coffin and whispered a final goodbye. "Thank you for everything," she said softly. "Thank you for opening your door that night. Thank you for loving me, for giving me a family, for building this life with me. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. Rest now, my love. Your work here is done." The years after Franklin's death were hard for Juanita, but she kept her promise. She remained active on the ranch, now run primarily by James with his siblings' help. She spent time with her grandchildren, teaching them Apache traditions and telling them stories about their grandfather. She took comfort in her sisters, who were both still living, and in the family she and Franklin had created together. When Juanita was 78 years old, she became ill. It started as a simple cough but developed into pneumonia. Despite the doctor's best efforts, she grew steadily weaker. Her children gathered around her bed, and Juanita looked at each of them with love and pride. "You are all everything I could have hoped for and more," she told them. "You have made this life worth living. Take care of each other, take care of the ranch, and remember where you came from. Remember both sides of your heritage with pride." "We will, Mama," James said, his voice thick with tears. "We promise." That night, as Juanita drifted in and out of consciousness, she dreamed of the night she and her sisters had stumbled through a blizzard to Franklin's door. In her dream, Franklin opened the door again, young and strong and smiling. "I have been waiting for you," he said, holding out his hand. "I kept my promise," Juanita replied. "I kept living." "I know," Franklin said proudly. "You did wonderfully. But now it is time to rest. Come with me, love. Let us watch the sunset together one more time." Juanita took his hand, and together they walked into the light. She passed away peacefully just before dawn, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. They buried her beside Franklin on the hill overlooking the ranch, and the entire territory mourned the loss of a remarkable woman. The Harper Ranch continued to thrive for generations, passed down through the family Franklin and Juanita had created. Their great-great-grandchildren still work the land today, a testament to what two people from different worlds built together through love, partnership, and unwavering commitment. And on cold January nights, when blizzards sweep across the Oklahoma plains, locals swear you can sometimes see two figures standing on the hill where Franklin and Juanita are buried. They are always holding hands, always watching the sunset together, forever bound by the love that started when a rancher opened his door to three desperate Apache sisters and offered them shelter. A love that transcended prejudice and hardship to create something beautiful and lasting. A love that would echo through time as a reminder that even in the darkest moments, even when all seems lost, kindness and compassion can change everything. That one person opening their door and saying, "My cabin is yours if you will stay with me," can be the beginning of something extraordinary. The Harper family, now numbering in the hundreds, still tells the story of how it all began. They tell their children about three Apache sisters who sought shelter during a blizzard, and the rancher who offered them not just his cabin, but his heart, his partnership, and his future. They tell the story so the next generation will understand that family is not just about blood, but about the bonds we choose to forge. That love can overcome any obstacle if people are willing to see each other as equals, to respect each other's dignity, and to build something together. And every June, on the anniversary of Franklin and Juanita's wedding, the entire extended family gathers at the ranch for a celebration. They eat and laugh and tell stories, keeping alive the memory of the couple who started it all. They stand on the hill where Franklin and Juanita are buried and watch the sunset together, honoring the legacy of love and partnership that gave them all life. The Harper Ranch stands as a monument to what is possible when people choose kindness over cruelty, acceptance over prejudice, love over hate. It is a reminder that the choices we make in moments of crisis can echo through generations, creating ripples of goodness that extend far beyond what we can imagine. 3 Apache sisters sought shelter during a blizzard. A rancher said his cabin was theirs if they would stay with him. And from that desperate night, from that single act of compassion, an entire legacy was born. A legacy that continues to this day, proof that love is stronger than any storm, any prejudice, any hardship the world can throw at us. This is the story of the Harper family. This is the story of Franklin and Juanita. This is the story of what happens when we open our doors and our hearts to those in need, when we recognize the humanity in others and offer them not just survival, but the chance to truly live and thrive. It is a story that deserves to be told and retold, generation after generation, so that we never forget what really matters in this life. Love, family, and the courage to build something beautiful together, no matter what obstacles stand in our way.